I like big screens and I cannot lie. The benefits I can't deny. When a smartwatch case has a tiny ass space, it just doesn't have that much space. So though the main difference between Apple's Watch Series 7 and the Series 6 is just a larger display, it makes an impact on a device as small as a watch. Apple also enlarged the UI across the board, making things generally easier to read and use. To make better use of that larger canvas too, the company also added some new watch faces and a full QWERTY keyboard for replying to messages. The other changes to the Series 7 are less obvious, like a new SIP, faster charging, and overnight respiratory tracking. For those coming from the last generation, this year might not feel like a significant upgrade, but the larger display does make a meaningful impact for anyone that's upgrading from a Watch SE, Series 5, or older. Even though its screen is bigger, the Series 7 still manages to retain basically the same footprint as its predecessor. It's a hair heavier than the Watch SE and Series 6, which makes sense since its case is slightly larger too. Unlike previous generations, which came in 40 or 44mm sizes, this year you can choose from 41 or 45mm versions. That minimal increase in dimensions barely felt noticeable on my wrist, and I could barely tell it apart from older Apple Watches. Once I turned the screen on though, I was struck by its roominess. This was also when the main design change on the Series 7 became obvious. Apple used a refractive edge here to make it seem like the display curves slightly along the sides, and it makes the face feel even more expansive. The bezels have also been whittled down to just 1.7mm or 0.07 inches, compared to last gen's 3mm. Overall, while the Series 7 looks at first glance to be very similar to the models that came before it, that changes when it's turned on. Oh, and a quick shout here to its durability, since it's the first Apple Watch to be certified IPX6 for dust resistance. Now, since I'm in reviewer mode and being very careful with our unit, I've not been in situations where I might damage the device. But I'll admit, I've already dropped the Series 7 once and it survived without a scratch thanks to Apple's crystal covering that it says is more crack resistant than on the Series 6. Either way though, the more spacious UI is helpful. Buttons for entering my passcode stretched out over the edges, and I didn't need to aim as carefully to strike the right keys. It's also easier to hit the right settings in the control center, and I can see more of my friends' messages at once. My heart rate and time passed during workouts are more readable too. If there's an app you use a lot on the watch, whether it's alarm, calculator, stocks, or others, it's likely their interface has also improved. Those with visual impairments may also appreciate that there are now new font size settings available, with the top limit having been raised as well. Although most buttons are between 12 and 20% larger, app icons on the All Apps grid page are still squished together and somewhat hard to pinpoint. That's a problem for those of us who use the grid view for all apps, and not so much an issue if you're on list view. The extra space also means Apple was able to introduce a full QWERTY keyboard for replying to messages by typing or swiping on the screen. Compared to the pre-existing methods of handwriting, dictating, or emojis, a keyboard offers a bit more flexibility, especially when the system correctly picks up your swipes. But like most swipe-based keyboards, even those on phones, the accuracy rate is maybe 60%, and I still preferred using dictation. Plus, the new screen may be big, but it's definitely not big enough to make touch typing a pleasant experience unless you're using your Barbie doll's fingers. Still, it's a good option to have when you can't speak out loud and want to send longer replies. I also found the placement of the backspace key a little awkward here. It's not where I'm used to where the return key would be. Instead, it's up at the top of the keyboard but below the send button. This takes a little adjusting, sure, but even when I did get used to the new placement, sometimes I would accidentally hit the send button that's very close by there too, and instead of fixing an error, I would send a flawed message. In addition to enlarging most of the elements across the Apple Watch's interface, the company also added new faces that can display more information at once. The new modular duo screen, for example, lets you place two expanded complications on top of each other, while still showing the time and an additional small complication at the top. You can choose to show the world clock with a timer or your favorite stocks performance with Apple Music, for example. I went with a Spotify controller and the weather forecast, and though the latter worked well, showing hourly temperature and sunlight data on the screen, the Spotify complication was, in a word, trash. It just shows the words tap to play music, and I have to waste a tap and a second to pull up playback controls. A second doesn't sound like much, but when I'm out running or juggling my groceries, I don't want to waste that time holding up my arm and watching my screen just to get the thing I want. I'm not going to harp on this because this is more of a Spotify problem than an Apple Watch issue. But given how many people use the music app, it would do both companies good to make this complication work better. The modular duo is the most useful of Apple's new faces for the Series 7, which include a contour style that pushes the clock's digits all the way to the edge, a la Salvador Dali painting. The remaining two are a portrait face that we already saw in the watchOS 8 beta and world time, which is helpful for those interacting with people in other countries. One last note on the Series 7's screen. Although its actual peak brightness hasn't changed, Apple has tweaked the system so that the always-on display is up to 70% brighter when you're indoors. This way, it's easier to read if you have your hand hidden below a table while you're at a meeting. That pretty much rounds up all the screen-related updates on the Series 7, which has a few other noteworthy upgrades. The most significant of these is that it charges faster, and it got almost fully juiced in under an hour with the new cable that Apple includes in the box. In about 10 minutes, I got close to 10% of power. Meanwhile, the Apple Watch SE only got to about 60% in an hour. You'll need both the new charger and the Series 7 to get these faster charging speeds, by the way. It's the coils on both the watch and the wireless disc that enable the higher rate, so this isn't something you can get just by running out and buying a new accessory. As someone who's constantly forgetting to charge her watch till she's about to run out the door, I appreciate the faster speeds. Speaking of the battery, the Series 7 is supposed to have the same runtime as its predecessor, which is about 18 hours. I generally found myself getting about a half a day more from the new watch than the SE, despite the lack of an always-on display on the latter. The Series 7 usually stuck around for a day and a half, almost 2, with the screen set to always on and tracking between 3 and 5 workouts every 2 days. That runtime is impressive given the larger screen, but it's worth noting that I haven't used the watch for sleep tracking yet. The battery efficiency here could be partly attributed to Apple's new S7 system in package, or SIP, which is based on the same processor as the S6. Though the actual hardware is the same, the company's redesigned some processes to make things feel swifter. The Apple Watch has been and continues to be a very responsive wearable that feels as fast as, if not faster, than its Android counterparts. But one area where Apple is still lagging the competition is sleep tracking. While companies like Fitbit and Samsung can use their wearables' heart rate monitors to detect what sleep zone you're in, Apple still doesn't offer that. The Series 7 did get a new feature that lets it log your respiration rate while you sleep though, and is something that's coming via watchOS 8 and isn't exclusive to the Series 7. And the same is true of features like the new mindfulness app, guided meditation sessions, the redesigned Photos app, Share Playing Fitness Plus workouts, and more. This means they're less likely to sway your decision on whether to get the Series 7 if you already have an Apple Watch. If you're new to smartwatches though, you'll find watchOS is a capable and comprehensive system that can help you track your workouts, automatically log your sessions, prompt you to be more active and mindful of your mental health, all while being a great extension of your smartphone. Though the iterative differences between the Series 6 and 7 seem minor, most people who have last year's watch aren't likely to be looking to upgrade yet anyway. For anyone else who's looking for a new smartwatch, the Series 7 will be a satisfying device. Though it's somewhat pricey at $400 to start, what Apple offers is currently the best in the market, especially for the iOS ecosystem. For reviews of smartwatches on the Android side of things, as well as phones, laptops, and more, make sure you subscribe to Engadget. And as always, thank you for watching.